And it also is nice because you're working with people that you can trust. But I mean, I must have, like I feel like I just piss people off, and I'm not pissing
That's
them
the role
off.
of the producer.
Yeah,
right there.
I'm
You
not
gotta be
pissing
the
them
nag.
off, but it's just like, hey man, like I'm so sorry.
This is episode 2 of the DropCast. Going to talk a little bit about pre-production and just kind of the behind the scenes of what kind of makes a video a video.
Yeah, between pre-production, obviously production, and then post, just all the stuff that goes into it and the importance.
Fundamentals.
Yeah, definitely. I think last time we talked and we said goodbye, we were loading up for that Porsche spec thing that we were working on.
Yep. That was a fun early morning. It was a little cold. My feet were definitely numb.
We're in that point right now, weather-wise, where it's freezing in the morning and then it warms up in the middle of the day, and you're like, oh, okay.
But it's also Michigan weather where it's like 30 one day and then like 65 the next. So make up your damn mind.
Yeah, right. We got super lucky with the weather on that one. Not lucky, but we were watching it for a while, and the weather's been kind of throwing wrenches in our stuff. Basically.
Oh my gosh! Like this summer was horrible.
The
turned
floods.
a two week production into 4 months just because of weather.
It was ridiculous.
But we got blessed on this Porsche shoot. It was a beautiful day. Had the sun shining through the leaves. The leaves did hang on too. I was a little bit worried because we had a pretty lax fall, if you will. So
it got pushed back. I felt bad for everybody who went on their UP trips and stuff, and then nothing changed yet.
Yeah. It wasn't last year. I mean, I remember looking at pictures like popping up from last year, and it was like banging at like early October, and when you look outside and it's still green out. So
yeah. Actually, if you go to TreySarmento's Instagram, you can see some screen grabs. Did you post those?
Oh, of the Porsche
Porsche
ad.
stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we'll put it up here on the video for people to see, but some screen grabs of that project. We're still in the early stages of that editing wise, so more to come in that sense. But huge shout out to everyone that came out that day and helped out. That was more so, like we said, a spec project, so obviously no one was getting paid. We try and feed our crew and do all that stuff that we can to make it worth it. But yeah, really appreciate Griffin, Sam, Lewis, Andreas, Sean.
Not Sam
because he
Not
bailed.
Sam. It's
Sorry.
okay.
He missed it, but
Yeah,
still a good
Sean,
dude.
and then shout out, like I said earlier, to Steve too.
Yeah,
As
Steve
a boy.
Zarbo with the Porsche. So putting up with our shenanigans, letting us run them back time and time again, getting the shot. So
Yeah, so the way that shoot really worked out was we were doing a lot of car to car, following side by side. So
we had Griffin's transit van, and it was like the mini transit van, so it like sat kind of lower to the ground. And we had the ratchet strap that I think it was your dad's for like hunting or something up in the trees.
Yeah, the tree stand.
Yeah, so we ratcheted that into the transit van and was able to like kind of lean out of the van without dying.
And not actually the tree stand itself, just the harness that you use to make sure you don't fall from the tree stand.
There you go.
Yeah. But that was cool. I've never seen you hanging out of a car like that. How did that feel?
It was. My shoulders were sore as hell the next day.
Really?
I mean, I could still feel it a little bit, but yeah, just especially with the stuff that we first did, which was kind of hanging out the back of the car as the car was following right behind us, and I was just standing or like sitting on my knees and having to like use my core strength to hold myself up, and it was.
Did you get bruises?
I don't think I had any bruises, no, but I had that towel, so
Yeah.
for my knees. But yeah, fully rigged out Komodo with Teradek V-mount, follow focus, all the 9 yards, balanced on the Crane 3S remarkably. So
Yeah.
it balances, but it's more so a test of your strength at that point.
Yeah.
It's not meant for long period shooting.
So it was interesting too because you were strapped down on the back of this van, and I was behind you, and I'm your spotter, but I'm not strapped in. And I'm just like, so if he goes down or something, and then I got like my hands on him, but then like, what do I got? So I'm like holding onto the back of the seat with my dear life. And then
I guess we didn't think that far.
Well, I mean, it's still okay. And then halfway through, I was like, does somebody have a knife? Because I didn't have my knife on me, just in case like something happened where we needed to cut some straps, like in a
Just
life-saving situation.
Dangling from the side of the car. You need to like cut it off real quick.
Yeah. But it was very safe. There was actually no hiccups at all.
Yeah, everything went really smooth. Besides, so like the run of the show of the day went, we kind of started off with the car to car stuff where we were kind of following on the side and then in the front and stuff. And then moved on to just some stuff like on the ground where we were doing some pass-bys with the camera on sticks and stuff. And then moved into some drone stuff, which Andreas, not thankfully, unfortunately sacrificed a couple action cameras. I think between between the tests and the actual shoot day, I think we went through like 4 Osmos. So
Yeah.
shouts out to Andreas, and
he's at that sweet spot right now where he's like in it to win it.
Well, FPV in its own is just like a whole beast. I've tried the simulators and stuff, and like there's nowhere I would have to spend years on that simulator to feel confident to fly a drone with a nice expensive camera on there like that.
Yeah, and for me too, I've done the goggles a couple of times, and I just get so dizzy.
Oh, yeah, you get
instantly.
like vertigo.
Yeah,
from
I can't even do it. Sometimes they say it's like the frame rate or like what your playback speed is, but I think it's really just the fact that I'm turning upside down and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. It makes me feel like I'm going to throw up.
Especially if you're not like sitting or like grounded. I'm sure that can get like...
And
he was doing it driving in the car, which is like...
Yeah, so we actually had him sitting in the front of this 63 Porsche. In my opinion, would already be a claustrophobic attack for me.
Oh, yeah, it's small. It's a little 2-seater. Like,
yeah.
You're cozy.
And the chairs are like kind of similar to these chairs right here. Like there's nothing crazy. But
yeah, going around the turns and bends while flying the drone and like dipping in and out is crazy. But if for people that don't know, like the feed, if you don't have the fancy DJI goggles and stuff that do the 1080 out, like the feed that the FPV pilots are looking at is like 240 480p. Like it looks like an old VHS tape, if you will. So like, yeah, and it's the range too. You'll cut out and it'll just be like, oh, I don't see anything anymore. So that's the really challenging part too, especially when you're flying around like trees or wires and stuff, is like you won't see that stuff until you're like right there.
And one of the things that he was running into as well, because we were watching the feed on a separate monitor, was the times when the crashes did happen, everything was great, but because depending on the tree species, some of them were beautiful orange and then some of them didn't have any leaves at all. So he'd be flying and then all of a sudden you'd enter an area where it was just dead trees, so you can't see the sticks or anything.
Blending in with all the browns and grays.
It might look just like a little piece of feedback on that screen or something at that point.
Exactly. Yeah, it's super tough. What was I going to say about the...
You got to write it down in your book.
I know. That's what... Yeah, we decided to get these books for this exact reason, because I had a thought and then we got a little far away from it, but...
It's okay. It'll come back.
Yeah, it's all good.
But yeah, all in all, I'm really happy how that shoot turned out. It was really fun. It ran super smooth. We only had a couple hang-ups. Talked to one police officer. They didn't care at all.
Yeah, I couldn't believe how smooth that transaction went. John just walks up. Yeah, we're shooting a Porsche. And then he's just, okay, have a good day.
Keep moving.
He was a sheriff.
Like, yes, please, I'll go.
Yeah, exactly. We had the Porsche coming behind him, and we're like, go, go, go.
Yeah. Another cool thing, too, was getting all those leaves on the ground.
Oh yeah, the leaf help definitely. Yeah, you guys tossing them into the road, so they just all.
Yeah, that was awesome. Can't wait for everyone to see that.
Yeah, another sketchy part about the shoot was just the car-to-car stuff. That was pretty challenging. So we had spotters in front and in back, depending on what kind of shot we were getting. But they would be on the phone or the walkie and. Just yelling out, clear, clear, clear. Oh, here comes one car, here comes 2 cars. And like just having to time that out was pretty challenging, but we ended up making it out scot-free.
Yeah, and I mean, we've always wanted to do stuff like that. I mean, we've done that stuff with motorcycles in the past, and we've done some stuff like that on certain occasions, but I saw Noah Mendez do it on his Instagram with that Jeep.
The Jeep.
With the Jeep, and I was like, man, like, what are you guys doing that for? And he was like, we're just doing it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, like, what's the protocol? And he was like, honestly, dude, we just have a spotter in front, maybe a spotter in the back if we need it. And I was like, okay, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I guess I just never thought about getting all my friends out to do something for free in the morning for a Porsche, but we put it together.
Our whole idea behind that Porsche ad too was kind of stepping out of the vein of like those kind of corporate-esque style videos and getting more into like the motorsports, action sports vein, if you will, and just kind of testing those waters, because I mean we both grew up doing some crazy stuff.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, just organizing it in a way where you got a spotter in front on the walkie talking to you about, like, you know, you've got a green SUV, this and that, like 3 or 4 cars clear coming around the bend. And at that point, we mapped out the road too, so we knew where our blind corners were and all that other stuff. But
yeah, until we get the clearance to shut down all of Huron River Drive, that's what
I think
you
that's
got
the way
to do.
to go. Yeah.
It wasn't too bad either. I mean, it started to get a little busy towards the noon hours of the day.
It was on a football Saturday too.
Yeah,
for a home game.
Thankfully, it wasn't starting until
Like 7.
late at night. But yeah, we won too. So go blue.
Yeah, nice. Did we? We did?
We did win. Yeah, we got Penn State next week. We'll see how we do.
Okay.
And then Ohio State, the big one.
Yeah, I still don't know anything about sports.
I try and I mean, I pretend to care about sports, but really, I just tune in when I can.
You're the person who taught me that I could be like, hey, Siri, what's the blank of the Michigan game? And then they do it. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, that's all you need. My little brother's crazy. He knows like every football player by their name.
He was
their stats,
waterworks
like,
over the Lions.
Oh, every time the Lions, which is a horrible team to root for, especially in his case, or any team,
how
anytime
old
the
is he?
Lions, he just turned 11.
Yeah.
But anytime the Lions or U of M loses, he's full tears. Like, I hate it. I can't believe they lost. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
He has some trouble losing. But
It's okay. I feel like everybody else might feel the same way when it comes to the Lions at this point.
yeah, I mean, it's hard being a Lions fan this season. They're 8-0. I just looked.
You either hang on or you gave up a long time ago.
Yeah, I think it's just a comedic standpoint to go to the games at this point. Like, let's see how far we can lose. So.
Hey, I mean, if you're good at losing, you're good at something, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that Porsche ad was really fun. That worked out really well. I think, honestly, what it came down to was like the steps that we had talked about. We're going to want to go over with like pre-production, production, and post. The beauty of this one was that we knew what we wanted to do.
And there wasn't a client on set talking
Exactly.
over us. Yeah. So that was really nice. I was going to bring that point up too. It's just like, it was good to see everyone too that like we worked with. I mean, we've worked with them in the past, and it's been years probably since COVID and stuff since we've really worked with that whole crew. So it was really good to work with all of them in a really lax environment where we're not pressed to perform for this client, you know? So,
And I was really happy to see how everybody had not only continued to perform as I remember, but also had stepped their game up a lot.
oh yeah.
Like we had brought ratchet straps, we brought certain things that we needed, but when Griffin showed up with that transit van, I mean, he had all of his mounting points, he had his own straps, he had all the fabric to wrap his car up so it wasn't getting any scratches around. He knew exactly how to keep his hitch open, like all that stuff. So I felt like I didn't even really have to worry about a lot of it just because I had trusted the crew a lot.
Yeah, totally. It's nice when everyone comes together and just like works as a well-oiled machine.
And then same with Sean Greco too, because I know me and him went to high school together back in the day, and it's so interesting to see how like that works out. You know, like you weren't really friends with that person in the past, and then you meet up in the future. And I remember when we first started working together, Sean, he had just bought that A7 III. And now he's moving up to a Komodo, like he's pulling focus like a champ. And it was just interesting because I'm like, okay, everybody's progressing. And it makes me really happy to see all of that, really. And then also you too with that Komodo. I mean, you already had the user interface down and everything. So
yeah,
that was cool.
I've shot on it a good amount of times with Garrett and stuff. He's brought me on and to DP a couple projects. So definitely was able to get familiar with that camera. And yeah, I got to get my hands on one too. But those lead times, I mean, Sean just ordered one and he's not getting it till January. So
Yeah.
but yeah, just Komodos and shit.
Yeah.
I call the Komodo the little tissue box.
Yeah.
Because fully or not rigged out, it's just a little square that's like bink.
It's like the tissue box you put in the middle console of your car, like an actual
like
tissue box cut in half.
Yeah, the travel size.
And when you told me that, I had a tissue box right next to me, and I just kind of looked over, and I was like, I don't really see that, but okay.
Hey, I mean, I'll take a tissue box over a oblong football like the Pocket 6K is.
Yeah.
Thing.
All plastic, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the weight distribution is weird. I mean, you can't fly that thing on a gimbal worth anything. So
Yeah. So yeah, back to the pre-production. I mean, so when we were thinking about that project, we had been talking about doing some stuff with Steve's Porsches for a long time. And because we've done stuff with him in the past with like his Beamers and the drifting and all that other stuff, it was just, let's just move it up and do something like that because we already knew he was down. But really what it comes down to in the pre-pro is it's not like you just hit up your buddy. I mean, we went over to his house. We looked at all the Porsches. We were in the garage. We learned some history about them. We met his father. He was all into it. And I just think it was really cool to just kind of sit down and learn a lot about those vehicles and the importance of them for this ad. Because if you remember, kind of like the process of trying to even figure out what we were going to advertise besides the car and the car's aesthetics itself. And it was sitting down and talking with Steve where he was explaining about how, you know, Porsche is slowly outselling their market because they're so expensive. And beyond that, people are really into them because of their timelessness. And I just thought that was really cool. He said
we had a couple meetings just to hash that out. You know, I mean, it took going over to his house, checking out all the Porsches, finally deciding like, yeah, we want to do the piece on this one. And then like from there, we had another meeting to kind of learn more about like Porsche as the brand and stuff. Cause I mean, everyone knows like Porsche is a fancy car, yada, yada, but like it definitely goes deeper with that, with the whole community behind it too. And that's just a interesting aspect where we were kind of picking his brain for that sense to kind of take what we want and add that and apply it to the ad. So,
and just hearing him talk about what they were when it comes down to like, he said something that really stuck in the back of my head. And I was like, okay, this is kind of going to be our backbone. He said, 90% of the Porsches that have ever been made are still being driven today.
Yeah.
Because of not only their reliability, but also how Porsche owners are reliable and car enthusiasts too. It's kind of like the second part of it. But because of that, we went and did some research on Porsche's reliability, how long they've been running, where they came from, and really just tried to build the ad around this whole entire essence of like these cars,
like timelessness.
Yeah. It's hard to be vintage if you never really went out of style, you know?
There you go.
Yeah.
And we were kind of picking his brain with all these statements kind of in mind for a voiceover that's then going to lead this ad. But yeah, when we first initially sat down, we're like, okay, so where do we start with this voiceover? It's not like the vintage car, yada, yada, yada. Like just, we needed to pick his brain to get those like strong facts of like Porsche owners and like the test of time and stuff to really push that home. So
even with time, like I was trying to think of not necessarily avant-garde ways to describe it, but just like getting more, I don't want to say the word heady either, but just a little more substance when it comes to the voiceover of like how we can portray this in a way that's really going to speak to the viewer. And I sat down and just started Googling like time, like in videos or like concepts of time. Yeah. And I was watching
motivational time videos.
Yeah. I watched Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about time and all this stuff and like how it's a concept and like you need for time to work, you need a beginning point and an end point, and there has to be some sort of motion in between from anything for there to be like a referenceable moment. So just like things like that just can really help wrap your brain around this concept. And
these are like early stages of this project when we were kind of figuring out what we wanted this piece to be. So like doing your research, watching those Neil deGrasse Tyson on time, like it has nothing to do with Porsches, but you're going to pick and choose he might say some solid sentences that might flick on a little switch in your brain and you're like, oh, there we go. Like we can jump off of that point or whatever that may be in your research and finding your voiceover or your just overall feeling of your piece, you know, I think is really important. And like you said, we kind of wanted to give it that more substance because, I mean, we could go out there and just film the beautiful Porsche and stuff, but then like to take it that step further and just kind of make it that much more engaging with the audience is like, I think where it comes into play to set yourself aside from the rest. So,
and back to the whole client aspect, it's like it was beautiful because we're working with somebody like Steve, who is 100% headstrong, gung ho, professional driver. Like that dude's been ripping. I've seen him race professionally on tracks, like with a bunch of other drivers and stuff. And it's good. Good. No, it's good to just know that you can trust your driver, you can trust the person behind it, and they trust you as well, which really builds like this authentic momentum to keep things moving forward.
It helps too that he has a little bit of understanding of like media and
True.
cameras and stuff too. So
because of all the Porsche conventions that he's been to, he's been like interviewed, he's done stuff, and like he can talk about his car and like tell you why it's important because he's had cameras in front of him before because they do international competitions for these Porsches. It's insane.
And he's always getting picked out too because he's like one of the youngest dudes at the events. So they're like, oh my gosh,
Porsche's like, oh, young kids. Yeah. He said it was him and another person of color, and they were the youngest people at the event. And the Porsche people, I mean, the demographic for Porsche is mostly older white men. So like just for those two people, like younger and a person of color.
Well, they were like on their like poster.
They turned him into the poster child. They were like, and even Steve said that the kid was the other guy that he was with was just like, yeah, man, this happens to me all the time because like I'm black, like at the Porsche event.
That's messed up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But it's interesting just to see how this is all going to turn out. I mean, when we pitch it and do stuff with it. So I'm really excited for that. But with the client aspect, because that's what I keep wanting to go back to, we knew what we wanted to do. Steve kind of knew what he wanted us to do or wanted to be a part of. And I think the beauty of that really helps us being able to control when we pitch this or put it into like demo reel or anything like that. We can represent ourselves as a company for what we want to do in comparison to like having, I know we had touched on this on the last one, like we kind of got burnt out on doing just like run and gun music videos. So being able to control what our viewer thinks about us through our content.
And I mean, that comes back too to like the client having this idea and being so gung-ho about this idea and bring it to the table, and we're just kind of like, yeah, there's some holes in it, you know, or it might not be the best idea, or it just is like really bland and straightforward because they don't have the best understanding of like what video or like media or what's even like engaging for an audience. Some clients are just so out of touch with social media and like advertising and stuff that you do run into those clients. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of difficult because they're the one that's writing the check. So you kind of have to go with what they say. So you definitely run into those types of scenarios. But to have that creative freedom, like you were saying, with our spec project to kind of show exactly what we want to do and how we want to do it, I think is really valuable.
So Shane Law, he is very skillful videographer. I mean, the dude edits Premiere on an MPC, like the beat maker.
Yeah.
That's how he'll like edit to the beat and like throw his effects on the beat maker. So he like, as he's cutting, because he does a lot of in your face style shit where it's like,
yeah, you can actually have an effect that's like on a dial. So like 0 to 100 and be able to like physically crank that. I've been wanting to map a MIDI board like that for a long time. So Shane, if you're listening, show me how to do that. Yeah,
and he's also into projection. But one of the things, like projection mapping and all that stuff, but one of the things that he said to me one time is, because he was kind of picking my brain about Drop when we were doing a lot of the important stuff. Not that we aren't anymore.
Important stuff.
Yeah, not that we aren't anymore, but kind of when we were starting to catch people's eye is what I'm saying. And he was kind of I would say some sort of mentor to me at the time. And I remember he was so savage about it. But he literally looked at me and he was like, so you guys are burnt out on music videos? And I was like, yeah. He's like, so why do you keep doing them? And I was like, well, we have our clients that we want to keep happy, you know, so we can keep those opportunities open. But at the same time, we also need money, you know, like that's what we do.
It's the difficult balance for sure.
Yeah. But he looked at me and he kind of smiled and he was, this is like, so now he's disc crafts, like, disc golfing.
He's doing all Discraft video. And
he recently just changed his Instagram name to Discraft Shane. So like
he's official.
Dude, he's traveling. He got like a new whip, like a nice like Tacoma, I think it is, or something. Like
nice. Doing well for himself.
Yeah, exactly. But he did it all because he had like curated this bid for this client and they didn't really know what they wanted, if I'm correct. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure that was the case though, because he had told me that he had just asked them so many questions and tried to figure out exactly what they wanted. And he picked the brains of every single person that was like kind of in charge of this scenario. And they kept asking for a number the whole time. And he was like, I can't give you a number because I don't know what we want. Like, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know how we're going to do it. And he was like, that was the fun part because he was kind of driving him nuts, so to say. And also, don't quote me on any of this. This is all memory. My memory sometimes does things. And he looked at me and he was like, I bet you guys... What did exactly he say? He said, I bet you guys would lose your shit if you didn't do a music video for a year or something like that. And I was like, what? Why would we not do a music video for a year? He was like, why, if you don't want to keep doing music videos, how are you going to have the time to step back and start curating your brand in the direction that you want and like do the things that you want to do if you're still doing these music videos?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely a rut or like a trap, if you will, with any field of video. You know, if you're doing wedding videos or if you're doing whatever, school photos or corporate work, you know, I mean, the more of that field that you're going to do, the more calls in that field that you're going to get. So like, it really is it can be a love-hate relationship, you know. In our case with the music videos and stuff, we were getting very burnt out, but like we had that client base to where it's like, we got some bills to pay, we have to do this. So we would end up doing those music videos to just make ends meet, if you will. So it's a hard balance to kind of choose and pick if you want, but it's power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then also one of the things when it comes to a lot of those earlier projects is that people would come to us and they'd be like, I have no idea what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that gets hard because if you have somebody that you're into, they'll pay you, but they have no idea what they want to do, then you have to sit back and try to curate this whole entire thing, especially if they're coming at you with like a really hard trap, like Detroit rap track or something like that. And you're like,
yeah, sitting there just
listening, like
trying to visualize this video.
Yeah.
It's like where you see is just very incriminating images floating throughout your brain.
Yeah. And it's like, how do you not only keep representing yourself in a way that you want to, but also represent this rapper, and just, you know, it gets really dicey.
And like clients too, they won't have an idea until the project's finished. And then they're like, oh, wait, why isn't it like this, and this?
Yeah, let's
and it's
change it.
Hold up, you didn't have a single idea, and we okayed the pre-pro beforehand, and it was that's what it was, and this is what it is. And
definitely.
Then they have all these ideas, and what it should be is very aggravating, and you run into that a lot.
Because I notice a lot, too, that people have this idea of what they want, you know, especially when it comes with like a lot of musical artists, because they want to be represented in a way.
Totally.
And they sometimes also see it from other artists. So it's like, okay, who are you trying to not necessarily imitate, but who's your representation? Who's your inspiration? All that stuff. And you can try to go over it with them, but sometimes it's really difficult to get that stuff down. And you'll give them the product, and even though the product is really good and they know it's really good, they're also just kind of like, they might look at themselves and be like, oh, I don't really like how I look, or what is this person actually going to think about it in comparison, or something like that. And it starts to get really dicey. And that's why I think when it comes to the pre-production, it's just so important to make sure that you have everything down pat when it comes down to idea, content curation, and everything.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up too, charging for pre-production, because that's a big thing that I feel like a lot of people take for granted or won't really charge for, you know. But all these times when clients come to you with zero ideas, and you're sitting there, like music videos, for example, if they send you a song and they're like, here's my song, let's make a music video, I don't have an idea, then you're sitting there for however many hours just playing that song on repeat, doing mood boards,
sometimes even days,
treatments, all of that. So yeah, that stuff takes time, and that should be accounted for and paid for. So having your hourly pre-pro rate is definitely important. And I can't tell you how many times we've done pre-pro for free. So
oh yeah, and I mean,
charge for your pre-pro.
Yeah, and now we're at this point where we're, like I said in the last one, we're kind of smaller fishes in a bigger pond. So we're getting hit up, you know, like by the New York contact, and they're like, hey, gentlemen, and like, this is what we're doing. This is the artist. And of course, as soon as we see the artist's name, we're always like, all right, we got this. We can do this.
Yeah, I mean, so like what you're talking about, there's like definitely two different, or like it's a scale of things per se. So like when our New York client hits us up, that's more so on like the
bidding,
bigger side of things, to where we're getting some projects that come across our desk that are a lot bigger than per se like some of the stuff that comes out of the city and what have you. But with those, it's more so, like you were saying, a bidding process, to where it's like, hey, we have this music video for X, Y, and Z. Can you write a treatment for it? You're up against however many directors. And
they don't even tell you how many you're up against.
Yeah, right. But I mean, so then it's a matter of us like trying to come up with the best treatment as possible, and with those too, you're not getting paid. But it's those scenarios to where if we were to get it, it's that opportunity versus cost kind of thing. So
yeah, and I mean it's really, and this is what when we say like we're going to talk film, photo, and industry. This is where the industry kind of comes into it, where it's like, oh man, everybody else is doing this, and when did this become okay, so to say?
That's
when did the corporations
cool.
and the music and it's totally not cool. Like you get hit up and they're like, yo, the budget is blank, and it's usually not enough, and then this is the artist, and you're like, okay, well, they know that we're gonna want to do this artist.
Yeah, and it's annoying in the sense where it's a lot of dangling of the carrot, I feel like. But I mean, it is, again, you got to look at that opportunity cost. But in the same sense, with that being said, like the opportunity cost might not be there. So like you might have to say no in that sense.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, yeah, and the fact that normally when the New York contact hits us up, it's like, hey, we have this music video. Can you write a treatment in like 24 hours? I mean, there's been times where we've been like on the flight back from a shoot, cranking out treatments for these projects, trying to get them and stuff. So
yeah, I remember
it's no easy feat.
I wasn't available for one of the shoots that you guys were going on. So you're on your way back from Colorado, and then I call you guys like, yo, look at the email, get acquainted with it, understand what they're talking about. Uh-oh. I'm gonna run that camera again. Once again, we need a cam op or something in here. We'll get one soon. You know, it'll usually be like Wednesday night. It'll come in like after 5 p.m. and like, hey, can you guys have this at our desk Friday morning? And we're just like, what? Like, and the scary part about it is when you're doing this stuff, it's like not in your state. So then
finding locations,
exactly, locations, flights, and the
talent, all that stuff.
And
it's like all foreign.
And then they'll offer you, obviously the budget, but then things change so much. Like, yo, we can do this if this all starts moving soon, but if it doesn't start moving soon, because usually shoot dates are like maybe 2 or 3 weeks out, those plane tickets are going to skyrocket.
And then the budget's not going to work, and we're going to end up eating money.
So. Yeah, and it's not even just because of those plane tickets, but it's just like everything. Like everything slowly starts to change, and you start paying more and more and more for things because of just not necessarily lack of planning on their part, but it's like seems like what I said, like this industry standard where it's like, what? How is this happening?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, we better get one of those treatments. I've written quite a few treatments, and
yeah, that was actually one of the things that I wanted to bring up with you guys. Like maybe we could have a show where we just talk about like some of the treatment ideas that we did, and then I was like, no, those are secretly locked away in the vaults.
Well, those two, like, I mean, for this case too, and anyone's case, when you're writing treatments, and let's say like it doesn't get picked for these bids, keep those treatments and you can mold them into another project, I mean, those don't just have to go in the trash because they didn't necessarily get picked. So like having that backlog of treatments, I mean, it's not just like rewashing treatments, if you will, but like maybe you can use that idea and mold it and like kind of use that base, if you will, to apply to another project. So it's good practice. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it in a sense. If like, I mean, you can't be too hard on yourself when you're not getting a Tyler, the Creator music video per se. So,
or like, and I feel like we can kind of talk about some of these now because some of these have passed. But I mean, some of the tracks have dropped. But like one of the ones that I was so gung ho about was the Lil Uzi Vert 21 Savage thing, and we were talking about the shootout inside the mansion, the helicopter on the roof.
Was that Lil Uzi?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it's just like, I want to do that,
I mean, it definitely is a different, like, when we're writing these treatments, it's a different way of thinking because, like, when you're dealing with these bigger artists, it's like, okay, well, anything is possible at this point, as opposed to, like, when you're working with these smaller artists and you have a budget of, like, $1,000 to $5,000, it's like you really are kind of in this creative box to where you're kind of trying to squeak around and, like, make things work in certain aspects, but when we do have these like bigger treatments or like bigger projects that are, or these bigger bids per se, it is like a different style of treatment writing because like I said, anything is possible at that point in a sense.
Yeah, and it comes down to like another thing too. When there was that one instance where the Ferta Gang, the Roddy Ricch thing.
Oh yeah.
Well, you have to remember your limitations too, because like there was a situation where people are getting moved to Detroit because they want to shoot a video in Detroit. And Detroit is where it needs to be with film to an extent, but sometimes it's just not. Like in LA, how many Russian cranes can you get? Probably a few.
Well, I mean, with that project, we were kind of ghost producing it, if you will. And then, yeah, that whole ordeal with Roddy Ricch fell through. But really,
I'm saying specifically because it's like, okay, you know, like you have to just know your demographic a little bit.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, just the outsourcing that we had to do, and we were trying to pull that all together. I mean, we couldn't find a whole techno crane. Like the closest option was Chicago. So,
and finding motorhomes,
Holy and
smokes.
like just outsourcing from like those bigger cities around Detroit. So like Detroit really wasn't the place for like all that stuff. So that we did have to again outsource it all. So. But yeah, like LA, to where it's like you have a dime a dozen, you can rent REs out the wazoo and not have a problem. So.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. But so we're talking about pre-production right now. How much more do you want to dive into it? Like, do you want to talk about kind of just?
Yeah, I mean, like I guess just for like the people that don't really know what we're talking about when we say pre-production. Basically just like the fundamentals. I mean, going all the way back to that like pre-production packet that we like kind of learned off of, but like really pre-production kind of starts with, I mean, you have your overall idea or concept, or if you don't have that, starting with a mood board. And with a mood board, I mean,
mood boarding is fun. Picking
a color palette, picking a soundtrack, if you will, or like the song of the video. And then from there, finding like screen grabs and like images to kind of replicate your tone and feel of your project really helps kind of get you a jumping off point when you're writing your treatment and getting that all together. But yeah, I would say it goes from mood board to treatment to storyboard to script, or script to storyboard. Flip those two.
And it really all depends on every single project too, how it's going to go down.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, like you're only writing scripts if you have narrative pieces and stuff. So, yeah, doing a lot of treatments, doing a lot of storyboards, shot lists. Shot lists are very important on set. I mean, we use them just about every single time. That way, you're not forgetting.
You have to. You
the
have
X,
to
Y,
them.
and Z's. So.
And another thing too is like this goes back to what we said on the last one. Like you can't really do it all by yourself. Like I mean, when these emails come in and we got to build these treatments and send them off. I mean, depending on who we're working with, it's usually Jack Anderson. I mean, we'll all just hop on the phone. Everybody will delegate something. It's like you work on this, let's marinate on this. We'll come back in an hour, and then it's usually like late too. Like that's just our sleep schedule gets messed up when one of those emails come in.
Yeah, we're definitely grinding it. Odd hours of the night trying to get stuff done.
And then trying to figure out how you're going to handle the current projects that you have on your plate too.
But those are the sacrifices you got to make for risk and reward.
Yeah. Trying to make it.
Trying to make it. But yeah, if we want to jump into the next category.
Production. This is, in my opinion, the funnest part.
If I could only do production, I would be a happy man.
But the issue is only doing production on your terms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Production that I want to do when I want to do it.
So, how you want to talk about roles, like your specific role, and like what you do when you get on set? Kind of like the difference between when you have control and when you don't.
Yeah. So I primarily kind of categorize myself. I mean, DP is a very strong word. I would like to say I'm a DP, but I'm definitely far away from what other people can categorize as a DP. So
humble of you.
Well, I mean, people go deep with this stuff. So, yeah, cinematographer, DP, and then like creative director. So kind of coming up with the ideas and the overall feeling and look of things. I would say on set though, yeah, just knowing your role is really important when you get like actually on set. So like whether you're a DP, AC, DIT, producer, director, AD, all of those. Just knowing your role and like what you're supposed to do come day of on set, because each of those roles has specific tasks to do that you gotta just know to do. And if you're kind of standing around asking what to do, sometimes you can get looked down upon, if you will. So just knowing what you're supposed to do. I mean, AC has a huge role in the sense of like prepping the lenses and making sure that that's all square to go, prepping camera, like pulling focus, all of those all come down to the AC, which is assistant camera, which falls underneath the director of photography. So,
by the way, I was thoroughly impressed by Sean Greco's performance on the Porsche stuff as the AC.
Yeah. He killed it.
Yeah.
He was good. Kept it sharp. Yeah, I don't know.
When you're a DP, what are you worried about / what are you looking for? You know, not necessarily on our projects. Like if you get called onto somebody else's, or like, what is your prep? You know, I know you do camera build and all that stuff, but
yeah. So like the day before a shoot, obviously camera prep. So building out the camera to the configuration that it's going to be needed for on set. The day before is always really important. Make sure all your stuff's working, your follow focus, all the 9 yards, just kind of checking that everything's ready to go so you don't have any hiccups when you're on set, especially if there's a client on set. But as far as like my getting ready, I'm trying to think.
Like, is there anything that you worry about when you're like, oh, I'm working with this camera today and I'm kind of going to do some research on like, you know, this
I mean, if you're ever like working with a foreign camera that you haven't worked with, I mean, YouTube is your best friend and you can really learn a lot from it, obviously. But I would say, I mean, it's just getting familiar with the cameras like in your hand, I guess, is probably going to be the most valuable thing. But again, like ask questions too. I know I kind of said the opposite in the sense of like, if you don't know your shit, you might get looked down upon, but ask questions. Everyone around you on set is like more than friendly to help. I don't really know where I'm going with this.
Okay.
I would say, I mean, as a DP, really though, like the biggest thing is just like knowing what your lighting is going to be, knowing your shots, obviously, but really like the DP's role is like to control the lighting and to control the final framing. So, just really nailing those things, knowing your gear, knowing what does what is really important. So like if you have a half scrim, quarter scrim, like knowing what those look like when it comes time to being on set is going to be important to like really just make things run as fluid as possible, as well as like focal lengths too. There's, I mean, over time you kind of recognize like what those focal lengths kind of tend to look like, especially with your camera body. If you're getting familiar with it, I know it changes as opposed to like Super 35, full frame, APS-C, yada yada. So I mean, just knowing what it looks like on your camera definitely valuable. I mean, they have apps like Cartridge that do like those live viewfinders to where you can enter in your camera and stuff. Those are really helpful for like location scouting and stuff, because then you don't have to bring out your full rig and frame up your shot and stuff. You can just kind of see a rough on like what you're looking like. Which, rolling that back a little bit, Cartridge and like location scouting is a big part of pre-production that we didn't talk about. So
yeah, there's a lot we didn't talk about with pre-production.
Well, yeah, we kind of really scraped the surface, but yeah, just location scouting is huge in filming with, or like just doing a project. And I would say taking those screen grabs from that Cartridge app is definitely something that's helped out a lot, because you not only get the accurate millimeter and like what lenses you might be using. It's really helpful in that sense.
Yeah. I remember one time we were on another,
and using those in your treatment too. So then you can like even draw on little like crappy stick figures and like get your framing
reference
similar to what it is. Yeah. So,
I remember too, there was some times when like, once again, you've impressed me where it's like, we were on that shoot in Detroit with Peter Harold, and it was at was that Ruth Ellis?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And you were talking, what camera was on the motorized slider?
I think that was just a pocket, but
yeah.
It had the Airy Master Anamorphics on it, which I can't believe that Edelkrone could hold that weight, and it was doing pan and tilts.
But it was funny because I remember you were saying stuff that like people were asking you questions like, Trey, how's this going to work out? And you're like, well, it depends on if you're going to be in Premiere or if you're going to be here or that, because here you just in Premiere with this specific, you were talking about like
I
your
think it was
flange
with
distance.
like B-raw and
Yeah, but it was just interesting because like you knew your stuff, you knew your programs, and it was really important because the people who were asking you the questions didn't, and they were confident in the fact that you were like, well, what you got to do is just lower your ISO a little bit because it's going to react differently inside Premiere.
Oh, you're talking about if it was it's the combination or the difference between DaVinci and editing in Premiere. So like when you're filming in B-raw, when you film 1,000 and below ISO, you kind of have that range to pick from. But if you go above 1,000, then you only have like, I think it's 1,200 to 64 or something. So it's kind of that different cap.
But it's that knowledge that you just had in your back pocket that you never thought like, oh, this is going to come in handy today. And the only way you had that knowledge is because you've been doing it and you've experienced it in Premiere yourself, because that's basically your second home is inside that program, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, it's just knowing the little like quirks and workarounds, like just knowing your stuff, basically. I mean, we ran into that issue when we were exporting this first podcast, and like we couldn't figure out you couldn't figure out why the audio was like cutting out, and I was like, I'll just try it in VLC player, and it's just a weird QuickTime quirk that, I mean, you just kind of learn these weird quirks that all these softwares and
by the way, Premiere
technology isn't perfect.
Premiere 2022.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Don't upgrade.
Yeah, my computer was on auto update. Whoops. But yeah, so like just, experience and just getting out there and keeping your mind open and learning and moving forward is going to be your best friend.
Yeah, I mentioned this in the other podcast, but working with people that are better than you too,
exactly,
or just like fresh-minded people is definitely really valuable. I mean, you learn how to do things a million different ways, because like I was saying, like in filmmaking, there's 1,000,001 ways to do the same exact thing. So in both filming and editing and all that jazz. So
yeah, and as a producer, like there's a lot of things that I still learn every single day just from working with other people who have been,
Yeah, what do you do on set?
I just gotta stand there with my arms crossed, trying to look important when the BTS photographer comes around.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so on set, it helps for me for kind of being a Swiss Army knife. Like it's really nice that I am trained in some gripping and gaffing, and I also have had camera operating skills in the past, and just being able to like know who needs help, where, and when. And if I don't have a PA, because depending on what's ever going on, it's me. So it shouldn't be, but sometimes it doesn't always work out that way, depending on how slim we want to keep our crew, especially during COVID. We were trying to keep things as slim as possible. And there's been times where we have understaffed, and that's just caused issues. But it's okay. And basically, my roles really come in at the very beginning. Like, I want to say even a little bit more before pre-production. Just like sitting down with the client, talking to them, keeping communications up, and just knowing exactly where you guys are at. It's like project management, really. And just keeping our practices fluid. So
yeah, and I mean, like, you do a good job at like our weekly check-ins and stuff. So like at the beginning of each week, just kind of sitting down and seeing what we have on our plate and what we got to get done, and you kind of act as that managerial role in a sense. And I mean, we both tackle all those things to do, but yeah, you definitely do a good job at kind of laying that bar down. One
of the things that I like to do is I try to keep everybody as comfortable as possible, because the last thing I want, like especially you to worry about, is like, what are we doing this week? Like, I need you concentrating on like, your creative skills, and not that you don't, but it's just like, if for some reason something's coming around where a client's reaching out to you, that's just more time that is taken away from you, because naturally, if even if we don't have a project on our plate, you're always in front of the computer doing something or pushing some skill forward. So it's just important to make sure that everybody's comfortable and staying in their roles, and especially on set too, where it's like if somebody's worried about like the most minuscule thing, then they're not concentrating on their job. And I just think it's really important for that to happen. And basically,
and that happens a lot too, where like clients will reach out to me and just like start talking about like business stuff, and I'm just like, hey, here's my manager, just contact da da da.
And there's a reason they do that, because they know I'm just going to tell them no on certain aspects. So
in a sense, yeah, certain clients know to try and test me first before they can go to you because they know that I might bend easier than you.
It's not that you bend. It's just, you want to get the job done, and it's true. But sometimes we just got to make sure that the job gets done in an equitable way.
Very true.
But yeah, just like on set, like really planning ahead. I mean, when I first started producing, it wasn't even really as a producer. I called myself like a glorified secretary because that's what it felt like. But I mean, when I was a kid, me and my family sometimes would go on vacations, and my dad would be like the driver, and he'd be in charge of like getting the car and the gear and getting the map and navigating and stuff. This is before maps. MapQuest is like MapQuest days. But then like my mom was also in the not in the back seat, in the driver's seat, like kind of, ghost running the show, and she was the one who had the fanny pack with the money and this and that. So it's like I would always try to use that as an example of like, okay, so I'm basically both roles here of organizing, keeping it in charge, but also making sure we're not going over budget, making sure that receipts are kept, it all goes in the log, our budget breakdowns and everything like that. And then just also as a company itself, like running the books, so to say. And I mean, we both do that, but like at the same time, like if we're a couple projects back and I got a folder full of receipts, like I got to sit down, enter those in, make sure that the bank's running, and like go run over our bank statements, because I don't know what's up with Chase, but like we've had so much money stolen from us in the past.
Dude, yeah,
it's so whack. Like $5,000 here and there just disappearing
like some
from our
shoe
account.
Company, like
And it's just like, oh man, these online like thieves.
It has happened multiple. Like
it's
happened more on the Drop bank account
than in my actual personal bank account.
Yeah,
and is that because we're just like
our business bank accounts like targeted or something? Because they got more bread.
I mean, I feel like, we buy like for example, like Jacob Owens Lutz, or like, a pre-pro packet from here or there. And it's like, maybe those sites aren't as secure as we think, but who knows?
I wouldn't be surprised if Jacob Owens is selling our shit.
I mean, he is a businessman, but no, yeah. So just like making sure that everybody's comfortable, and then just sticking on schedule, making sure you're constantly looking at your watch. And there are producers that I really like, that I look up to, and then I just see how they're doing it, and then I'm just like, that's kind of what I want to be like. For example, Marissa, is her last name Clemens? Marissa, yeah. I worked with her on set once, I think, only one time. But just like watching how she keeps control of everybody, and just keeping everything fluid and smooth, always on walkie, just making sure that people are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, but then also still having a cutthroat, authoritative mentality to where it's just like, yo, people, come on, let's get it together, or vice versa, and still being friendly and enjoyable person to be around. And then, the way she went from an actual company to building a huge resume, and her website's immaculate, and then being able to freelance. And what was it? She started freelancing, and then within like a week or two after she announced that she was doing full-time freelance, she was on a helicopter in like Yosemite or something doing other projects. And it's just like, man,
there we go.
Yeah. You just got to be good at organizing and doing what you're supposed to be doing, and
knowing the right people.
Exactly.
Do you want to talk a little bit about just like keeping the budget under wraps? I know you touched on a little bit of just like keeping receipts and stuff, but like how do we make sure we don't go over budget? Or not how do we make sure we don't
I mean,
go
it's a
budget,
thing. It's a delicate balance. I mean, first of all, you, my friend, my cameraman, likes his expensive stuff. So it's funny. So I watched the movie recently called Party Monsters. It's Macaulay Culkin and Seth Green in the 80s, and they're like two gay guys who are just club life. It's based off this club kids. It's a true story where they basically just have like parties in the back of semi trucks, like do all this stuff. It's a really weird movie, and dude, it looks like it was shot on the worst camera I've ever seen in my life. I was super surprised because honestly, it looks like some student films in certain shots. Okay. And I Googled it, and I was looking at what camera it was, and it was shot on like a $5,000 Sony like camcorder. And I was really surprised.
Like for the times or something?
I don't know. I think that might have been a creative decision. The movie's budget was $5 million.
80s Project X.
It was actually it was filmed like 2000 or something like that. So it seems like And it's just one of those things where I was like, oh, they didn't spend enough money in the camera department. Like they were running and gunning with this Sony camcorder. But just making sure that, you know, you have your budget. First, you start with your day rates. I mean, who's coming onto the set? How many people do we need? What is everybody's rates? I know your rate. I know my rate. I know our editing rates. I know our pre-pro rates. I know our director's rate by heart. And like those are all just like already on our budget sheet. And this is like a huge sheet that's hooked up to Excel where everything is connected depending on how many people are going to be there, the quantity, the hours.
Like talks to each other too, which is nice. So you can like enter in a quantity and then it brings it back up to the overall total.
And it does everything from like, you know, food, your craft situations, miscellaneous when you have to like have bathrooms or mohos. Ooh, I got to stop drinking carbonated beverages and coffee right before this. And then, but it's like, you know, all that stuff has to get entered in. And usually that takes about like 20, 30 minutes once you have decided your crew. And this is all after you have your pre-production mapped out. So I know exactly our run of show. I know how many days this is going to take because we've all curated this together as a team. So then I enter all that stuff in and it gives me all my estimates. And then this also comes down to flights, hotels, everything like that. And this is where as a producer, it starts to get a little scary for me because, you know, this is our estimate. Those numbers are going to change as rates go up depending on what's happening.
When you buy it.
Yeah, when you buy it and all that stuff. And just like one of the most annoying things is location scouting. Not necessarily peer space, but like other things like that. As you get closer to things, like it gets more unavailable, you know, especially with rental houses. It's like as you get closer to the dates.
Oh yeah, when you promise a client this location and then they're lollygagging around, and then by the time we get the budget through, it's already booked, and you're like, well, I'm sorry.
What were you guys? Yeah, what are you guys doing? But then that like comes and falls on us, and that's where that industry toxicity comes in. And I mean, talk about film industry toxicity with the unions and everything that's going on right now in LA. I think everybody's just kind of fed up. But the way that it works
They need sleep.
Yeah, they need sleep. But, you know, just making sure that you know exactly how much money you have curated for all that stuff and just having it in a document and paying close attention to it and having your contingencies.
I was just going to say the beauty of Drop.Creative too, being just us two, like we expand and contract so much depending on per project. So having that ability to bring on other people and expand when we need it is, I think, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that makes me feel good but also underachieved is when, you know, I'm talking to like professionals that are more in like business industry. Like I have some family who are in banking, and like I know some people who are like that also run companies and CFOs and CEOs and stuff, and they're always asking, how many employees do you have? And it's like, dude, I don't want employees. Like it would be nice to be a huge company that like had employees, but like then you got benefits, you got hourly wages, you got payroll, you got all this stuff. It's like, no, give me your W-9, I'm writing you a check, 1099 gig contractors all the way, baby.
Right.
And I would love, you know, not that I'm encouraging non-union work, but we're just not at that point yet.
Very true.
But yeah, at the end, I always kind of like, with the budget, explain it in layman's terms for everybody so that nobody gets any panic that sets in, you know, well, basically you. So if we go over budget or we have to eat money or anything like that, I always have a little bit of side money stashed away somewhere in the budget. And I mean,
that's what a contingency fee is for people that don't know.
But even beyond the contingency with our other production fees and other things like that, where like if you know, our hotels are going to be this much and the hotel rates are this, I'm going to make sure that in the budget, we have a little extra wiggle room.
But real quick, for the people that don't know what a contingency fee is or a production fee, kind of the same thing, they bleed together. But basically is just a fee that you charge on every single production that basically serves as like a extra money fund. So like a contingency fee of $500 would be used for, let's say we go over $250. We can use that money to then cover that, and we're not then just like taking it out of our pay.
And I mean, for example, dude, this information entropy project that we did, we didn't have much of a contingency at all. And honestly, it wouldn't have even mattered with the contingency because that shoot was supposed to be 2 back-to-back fully packed days. But Detroit and Michigan and everybody just got flooded over the summer. Yeah,
we mentioned it in the beginning of the podcast, the 2-week production that turned into a 4-month.
And it started to get scary too, where we were like, man, like thank God for our clients being as cool as they are and understanding, because like, you know, the creative director that we were working with for them is also involved in production. Shout out to Chip. But it's like, you know, there's only so much you can do when the world around you doesn't want you to do it. Like,
well, I mean, yeah, we were going for this like Cali skateboarder kind of vibe, and when it's like
picnics, kayaking,
all of the fun summer activities that just don't really work well when it's overcast and all bleh out. But
or it's just raining an inch and a half for like 4 days straight.
Yeah, not to mention the shoot that we were on coming back from Pontiac, and we had to hit Michigan Ave, coming off of 275, hitting Michigan Ave in my little it's one of my cars, the Civic. I call it the science experiment because it has 350,000 miles on it. Getting off of 275 there right on Michigan Ave going towards Ypsi, hitting those intersections that were like 3 feet of water probably, like in the Civic, just like keeping it floored, hoping we don't stop and kill the engine.
We were driving like 25 miles an hour on the way back on the highway with the hazards on.
Oh, but once we got off the highway, it was bad news bears.
Dude, the whole intersections were flooded, and basically there was a line of people, and in front of us in the intersection that we had to drive through,
oh yeah, you
there was a
see
car floating.
See the 2 cars just with the water like up to the
engine
rear
was
brake
sunk.
lights.
The engine was sunk, and the back trunk was like up in the air floating. Like the back wheels were not touching the ground. The people were on the side.
Yeah, we actually pulled off, and like we got out of the car, and we're like, well, what do we do? Both ways on the one way there, we're both flooded. We see a dude in a lifted truck
in the Ipsitucky, like
blasting through this like 3 feet of water. But then the like cars behind us are starting to stack up, and then I see 2 semis pull up.
We talk to them.
I'm like, oh, John, get in the car quick. We just follow right behind the semi in their wake and was able to get through. But I don't think if we didn't do that, I don't think we would have gotten through.
It was semi truck, 5 or 6 cars, and then another semi truck. The first guy went, the other cars went behind him like Moses parting the Red Sea.
Exactly.
But then the dangerous part is like the water would go out, hit, and then it would come right back in. And then like if you were kind of in the back, like, and we were going through with your Civic, and the water went over the headlights, and the car started to go dark.
It was coming over the hood.
It was coming over the hood.
I blew both the front hubcaps off. I didn't notice till the day before, but because of the water, it blew both the front hubcaps off.
And the engine's going brum, 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 brum,
I have it floored too, and we're going like 10 miles an hour.
And it's like if that engine stops, you're done.
Oh, that car is toast.
You were smacking the hood. You were like, come on, baby, let's go, go, go. And then we got out, and you were like, yes, Honda power, we did it.
It's the science experiment.
Yeah.
Stop recording again.
Yeah.
Man, the camera cannot keep recording.
It's okay, we'll figure it out. But yeah, so basically just another thing too is always plan backup days. I mean, we had backup days for this, but we were also in the middle of summer, so like we're at peak capacity, and we were flying out to Wyoming in like the very next week to go shoot this RV commercial. But the weather was so bad here. And then basically what happened with that project is because we still have our day rates, you know, hourly, we were still working in the same vein.
But it was just spread out.
Yeah. And it was just so rough.
And I got to give props to you being the producer on like getting with everyone's schedule and stuff too. Because we were running with like a lot of extras or a lot of talent that we needed, and just like having to reschedule all of those was
everything
like nightmare and a half.
And it also is nice because you're working with people that you can trust. But I mean, I must have, you know, like I feel like I just piss people off, and I'm not pissing
That's
them
the role
off.
of the producer.
Yeah,
right
I'm not pissing them off, but it's just like, hey man, like I'm so sorry. Like it's gonna rain again this week, so and like this person's schedule doesn't line up, and then this person does it, so then you got to cast again. And then there are some people who like still really want to be a part of it, but then you're just like, unfortunately, because your schedule doesn't line up, we're gonna have to go with somebody else, and it's just part of the play.
Can't make everyone happy.
Yeah, you can't. But honestly, another thing about being a producer that I think is the most important, especially working with your clients and working with your crew, is being as transparent as possible. And by transparent, I mean don't bullshit anybody. Don't lie to them. Don't tell them something else. Don't lead anybody on a string, because it's just going to end up making people mad. And if you're transparent, people understand as well, especially in showbiz. I mean, one of the things that happen the most is just things change all the time, and you have to be ready for it. And I always just say, you know what, that's showbiz, baby. But like, it's what it is.
Yeah, definitely.
Where we at?
We stopped it midway through, so halfway.
We're at 50 minutes and we stopped it.
Yeah, we're well over an hour here.
Is
there?
We didn't even go back into post-production.
We haven't touched on post at all. I mean, let's keep going.
I would like to keep going.
Let's do it.
File organization.
Okay, I can take it from there. So like DITing, super important practices.
What's that mean?
Data image
transferring.
Yeah. It's like when someone asks you, I remember very early in my video career, I had a interview at this corporate company, which I'm thankful I didn't get the job for. But I remember one of the questions the guy asked me was, "What does LUT stand for?" And I was like, "Oh, I got this. Lookup table."
He's like, "Oh, this guy knows his stuff, man."
What is a node? I was like, "Bro, are you serious right now?"
They were like,
Come
"What's
on."
a null object?" And I remember too.
Yeah.
That was one of the questions.
So post-production, DIT. So so when you're a DIT, I guess that's a little bit different than like post-production just on your everyday projects. When you're DITing, there's definitely some like third-party softwares that you can use to offload data onto your hard drives. First of all, for those that don't know, a DIT is basically someone that handles all media. So like when you're shooting, they'll hand you an SD card, CFast card, SSD, whatever, and then you're responsible to then dump that, put it on its respected hard drive, make backups, and what have you.
Labeled correctly.
Exactly.
Everything.
And then just make sure the media is ready to go after that and ready to be formatted after it's been backed up and dropped. So that's the role of a DIT. But when we're dealing with like our personal projects and we're DITing for ourselves, I mean, it's the same sort of practice. But real quick, like I said, with that third-party software, basically what that thing does is you can run it through there and it will upload all of your footage onto your hard drive. But as it's uploading, it's also checking the footage for hiccups or dropped frames or what have you. So you'll know if it's like, oh, take 5 was like a bad take, even though it was the good take. So those softwares are really helpful to have just so you know you're not screwing yourself over. But I don't use those very much. It's more so, it's kind of an expensive software, and it's more so if you're getting hired out as a DP or a DIT, using that software is definitely recommended. But that's like if you're gonna be a DIT. Shout out to like Nigel and Vader and all those cats.
Mike does a little bit of DITing sometimes too, right?
He did. He's on the Steadicam now.
Steadyhurst, baby.
Steadyhurst. Shouts out. So yeah, with our projects, basically, so let's say we just shot a project. First thing I'll do, make a folder on a hard drive, make a exports folder, a Premiere folder, After Effects folder, if we're diving in there, a footage folder, photos folder, assets folder, and I'm missing one more, exports folder.
Exports, maybe
Yeah, sure. So just having your general practice of all your folders laid out in your respected folder of that project is super just helpful to have everything organized. That way you're not just dumping everything into one folder and it's just like you're scrolling through it. So dropping it all on there, I'll normally drop my footage into the footage folder, name it A, B, C if we have multiple cameras, into those folders. And then once I drop the footage and make the Premiere folder, I normally make a duplicate of that and then make a backup on a hard drive till after I'm done with that project. And then once it's done, I normally will free up some space if we're shooting on some beefy cameras because they eat up terabytes.
Data hogs,
yeah, you're right. So once we get the data all organized there, then it's jumping into Premiere and getting your selects down. One thing I like to do as a DP when I shoot a project and have access to the footage that I'm shooting is normally the night of or like the next day when the footage is still fresh in my head, I'll go through and just kind of go through every single shot and get my selects down. They call this making like a daily, if you will. So just a daily of your best shots. Again, doing this as soon after the shoot as possible I find helpful, just because it's, again, fresh in your mind. But yeah, once you get your selects down, kind of using those as your pool to kind of grab your clips from when building your edit.
And you mean selects when you say that, you're talking about in and outs of the good clips that you want already put on a timeline.
So I'm going through every single clip in Premiere, getting that right little clip that I want and dragging it onto the timeline, and I kind of have a group of all of my good clips, and then from there I can kind of just like drag them into the edit as I see fit. So kind of laying it all out there like that gives me, just as I've kind of grown and learned, it just kind of gives me a better understanding of everything that I'm working with. So yeah, that's a little trick that I find kind of helpful in my workflow.
It really helps too, because when it comes to me and Trey working on our own projects through Drop, we do a lot of passing back and forth of hard drives. So like you'll have a hard drive for a day or two, then I'll take over and have it for a day or two, and then we'll pass it back and forth. So just making sure that those files are organized for me and for you.
No one likes unlinked footage.
Yeah, unlinked, or just like you're missing an asset somewhere.
But it still happens when you're downloading a little asset here and there. Sometimes you'll forget to drop it in the folder, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah, you can always work that out. But just like inside your project too with Premiere, like keeping your bins organized and keeping everything to where it needs to be, it's just super important. And like when Trey does those dailies, it's nice because if he passes a project to me, I can always go to the daily timeline and find certain shots. Like if for some reason something was working at first, but then it doesn't work as the edit progresses, it's really easy to go back into those dailies and find a very similar shot or like a different take or something like that you can move and put there as well, instead of me having to go through and digging through that footage. So just being able to make sure that every step of the way, everything is labeled, organized, and just where it needs to be.
Yeah, it just kind of speeds up your workflow, like as a whole, just having that that daily with like the fat that's already trimmed off it, because then you're not skimming through like just stuff that isn't important.
Yeah.
But I mean, from there, it's really a matter of like, I'll normally work with what my visual is first, getting color and timing and like the whole edit down. And then normally sound effects come towards the end. So like building your soundscape and like really making your footage come to life really comes towards the end of the editing process, because once you have your whole timeline set up and what the kind of pace of it's going to be, then that's where you start bringing in those sound effects to really amplify it. And you can use those sound effects to either like amplify something that's happening in the footage or amplify a cut or something of that nature, and it's just kind of giving it that extra juice.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because it always varies person to person and project to project, because I know there are certain people that would say the exact opposite, that are like, and it really just depends too, because
people build soundscape first and then we'll build the video on top of it too. But yeah, it's personal preference.
And the reason that usually happens too is because of time constraints. Like say if you have like for an advertisement, you're working with a 30-second spot, or you're working with a 1 minute and 30, or you're doing like a 2 minute something mini doc or something like that. So having those songs pre-selected will help you understand where you're going to drag and drop your footage, and just where you're going to amp it up, and like where the beat, all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So honestly, when it comes to post too, it's don't be scared to try to push your footage a little extra by maybe paying $1 or $2 for some assets. You know what I mean? I mean, just like film convert is one thing that a lot of clients like eat up, especially if they're in like the fashion world or something like that, because even though we've got all these expensive high def cameras, film is in.
They want it to look like shit.
They're like, yo, we can just dirty this up a little bit, just things like that. And it really will also help kind of differentiate your projects from other projects. I wouldn't say transition packs, because those are very cliche. But
yeah, I mean, picking and choosing with taste is definitely important. There's amazing assets out there, and then there's absolutely horrible assets out there. So,
and then just building stuff from scratch too. Like for example, if you're watching this on YouTube, because we don't have a camera operator, sometimes our camera goes down. And yesterday, Trey completely whipped up his own asset from scratch that you're going to see on YouTube whenever our camera goes down. It's like really cool, just being able to work in those programs and just like build your own assets as well, I think is a really...
Yeah, that was like the biggest thing when I was like the 1 year I spent from on Final Cut switching over to Premiere is like my mentality of Premiere was like, it's not so much just like drag and drop presets, but more so you have to build it yourself and a lot more customizable in that sense. So
you have a lot more freedom.
That's what I appreciate for sure. I mean, I remember times in Final Cut where I'd even just be trying to like scrub the little timeline scrubber and like it wouldn't even like go on like the right. It would always just like jump to like the next frame or something, Cut. You know, like it would. There's just little things to where you couldn't really fine tune it as fine as you wanted it. So.
And also just the overall workflow. I mean, especially when we're passing back and forth hard drives with me and Trey, like kind of the way that it works with us, you know, it's depending on who has the hard drive or the cards at first. Either I'll be dumping or Trey is dumping, and usually it's him because he's got the camera. But like I'll usually start building a timeline and going through and kind of getting everything where it needs to be. And then, you know, when it comes to my editing limits of something where I'm just simply not as good as you. So what I would do is pass it over to you, and then it's really nice for you too, because you don't have to look through all the footage and do all that stuff.
Yeah, specifically like with the Jerk and Joloff, the live event Caribbean parties that we cover.
Yeah.
I feel like we've kind of nailed down our workflow with those, where it's that thing where you kind of go through and pick those like selects and kind of get this base through to where once you pass it off to me, then I'm kind of just adding the flair and the spiciness to
little razzle dazzle,
little bedazzle.
Yeah, and it's great too because I can see how Trey's doing it, and then I can just get better at it and keep doing my own thing too. Because I know that Trey's seen it sometimes where I'll take some footage and really do my thing, and he'll be like, "Wow, this is actually pretty good." You know what I mean? I'm like, "Thank you." So it's just like being able to share assets and learn, and basically just knowing once again that there is somebody better than you that you can learn from is like the important part.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, and then after that it's just color, audio, all that other stuff, which we could go in forever, but I think we might be kind of hitting our limits here.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick surface level on color. I love starting with like a Rec 709 LUT just to get that base color from lifting it up off a log. And then once you have your Rec 709, it's really toning it or tuning it like to what you want and what your feeling is from there. So like after you have your Rec 709, it's really a matter of just warming up or cooling down certain aspects of your image just to get that feeling. So the Rec 709 is just to get that beautiful color, and then I look at like the grade to get the feeling, if you will.
And I've seen you do some stuff in Premiere with color grading, and I'm like, what the hell? How did you do that? And you're like, oh, I just masked it here, there, did a little bit, brought all the color back from the sky, like hit my horizon here. This adjustment layer only works on this half of the screen.
There's definitely some weird workarounds that you have to do to get like a DaVinci style color grade in Premiere. I'm so fast in Premiere that like switching over to DaVinci is like,
it'll happen.
It's a little difficult for me just because a lot of our projects can be turn and burn. So like getting it done the fastest as you can is kind of key.
And that's actually like one of the things that people love about us client wise.
But I have been slacking in the sense of like jumping into DaVinci. I mean, I really would like to take a class. I know Garrett Sammons is talking about taking one of those courses down in Chicago to where it's like a couple day course where they fully walk you through it. And I think like in person might make me get a better grasp on it, because I mean I've watched like Quasi Wasabi, or I'm butchering his name, but a bunch of colorists on YouTube and stuff walking it through, and I mean I have a good understanding, but again it just kind of comes down to time. But
yeah, I don't really think you've been slacking on it. I think we've just been, it's hard when we have a lot of other stuff to do.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different. But yeah, with Premiere I've pushed the lumetri color, if you will, and like making multiple lumetris, like one specifically on skin tones, and even like taking adjustment layers and making masks on them to like tone down a sky or tone down whatever we want, you know.
It's to the point where when you pass it to me, if that work's already been done, it's basically impossible for me to like do anything right on the timeline, because I'll just be dropping masks, moving shit around. I'm like, oh God, like
it does
what
get
happened?
really messy really quick at times, especially when you're working with big projects. Like, I mean, think back on the timeline for PSA, you know.
There's a big boy.
Yeah, it's thick.
Yeah, and shouts out to Liam Karras because he was one of the main editors on that, basically through and through.
Yeah, we'll spend a whole episode talking about that one.
Yeah, but for today, I think we might be.
I think that's just about it. I mean, we definitely scraped the surface of all the 3 aspects of production. So.
Yeah. Stick with us. Episode 3 coming soon. Follow us on Instagram, The.DropCast, all one word, The.DropCast with a period after the. You can follow me on Instagram as Camera.Cowboy and TreySarmento as just TreySarmento. It's very easily spelled.
It's kind of hard to forget if you know my name.
Yeah, right. But yeah, subscribe to us on YouTube. And
new episodes dropping every Monday.
Yeah, we're going to be doing that. So
let's do it.
Yeah, good morning. Monday morning. On your commute, you can listen to us.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, everybody.
When you're editing.
Yeah, or when you're editing. That's it. See ya.
All right, y'all. Until next time.
Peace.